Today is December the 12th. Today, Israel returns from the exile. In reading through the Bible in a year, I'd like you to read Ezra, the first 5 chapters. Now, in the book of Ezra, we have the story of Israel's return from the exile. They have been in Babylon for about 60 years when King Cyrus says this. We're in Ezra 1, verses 2 and 3. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He's appointed me to build him a temple at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any of you who are his people may go to Jerusalem and Judah to rebuild this temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, who lives in Jerusalem. And may your God be with you wherever this Jewish remnant is found. Let their neighbors contribute toward their expenses by giving them silver and gold, supplies for the journey, livestock, as well as a voluntary offering for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Then Ezra goes into some detail about what came from the king's own coffers, the exiles that returned with the leaders. The leaders in chapter 2, verse 2, are listed as Zerubbabel, who was the civic leader. He was made governor of this new province. Jeshua, who is the high priest, and then Nehemiah, who actually doesn't come until a bit later. But we have these two people primarily, Zerubbabel and Jeshua. Zerubbabel is from the line of David, but he is given the title of governor. They go back to Israel. They begin to rebuild, and the first thing they build is an altar. They build the altar, and then they make offerings to the Lord. In chapter 3, they begin to rebuild the temple. They lay the foundation for the temple. It is interesting. In chapter 3, verse 12, many of the older priests, Levites, and other leaders who had seen the first temple wept aloud when they saw the new temple's foundation. It was so much smaller than Solomon's temple. Others, however, were shouting for joy. So there's this mixed reception of the new temple, gratitude that it's being built, but it is just nowhere near what they remember. In chapters 4 and 5, locals oppose the rebuilding of the temple. They send a letter now to King Xerxes, and apparently Xerxes was a new leader, and he said, after checking history records, this is a rebellious people, tell them to stop. But by the end of chapter 5, they write Darius. Now, Darius is unknown to history, which leaves two possible conclusions. One, that Darius is actually the same person as Cyrus, just a different name. Or actually, I prefer Darius, I believe, was a regent of a satrapy. Now, it was the main satrapy, the satrapy of Babylon. I think Darius was the person that Xerxes, first Cyrus and then Xerxes continued with, allowed to rule, to execute his commands and to govern the region of Babylon. That's why letters after going to Xerxes end up going to Darius, because he's the one that's going to carry out the instructions. Israel has returned from exile. There are very few other nations that can say that. In this case, the Jewish nation saw what was happening as the hand of God. God is indeed sovereign over our countries. He is ultimately the one who's in control. Like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional on whatever platform you use to listen to it. Email your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll see how Judaism returns to Palestine.